All right, everyone. The drug war continues to be ridiculous. Ken Paxton, Lieutenant Governor of Texas, announcing that they intend to try to move to ban THC products down in Texas, actually. I strongly oppose this. I realize that some people are like, well, weed smells bad. Maybe they think that it makes you lazy, etc. And this is something on which I've sparred with members of my own audience repeatedly. I am completely against the drug war. I'm completely against regulating these substances beyond making sure minors don't take them, and other things like disorderly conduct, DUI, those still apply the same way they would with alcohol. Beyond that, I don't think the government should play any real role in regulating substances. THC products, who cares? It's THC. Now, somebody can screw themselves up by dabbing, like if they hyper concentrate the cannabinoid products and then they're railing it. Yeah, that can be a little bit of a problem. They can fuck themselves up. I simply don't believe that it's pragmatic to wage a war on these mind-altering substances. We've seen what happened with prohibition, for example. Eventually, you ended up with a bunch of jury nullification after a period in which gangsters took over everything because the only other people that were making booze were moonshine and out in the moonlight, so to speak. You know, a bunch of Rufus rapscallions with their still out in the middle of the Adirondack Mountains or the Ozarks or something. And prohibition did not work. The temperance movement that led up to it made sense at the time. It was predicated on harm reduction, but it never reduced harm. The problem is it created more problems than it actually solved. Yes, there was less booze, and then the government poisoned some of it actually at one point, and this is a big scandal that most people never learned about in U.S. history class. I have no doubt that they're doing this with drugs as well. Who do you think is lacing everything with fentanyl? I'm sure that it's not just some random cartel member. Just sorry to say, I think the cartels are more the smugglers of the product, and it's inserted later by other third parties. Just saying, this is always a possibility. It has happened several times in U.S. history before. The war on drugs is ridiculous for the reason that it's not pragmatic. People seek mind-altering substances. They will always seek mind-altering substances. Human beings tens of thousands of years ago were brewing primitive beers or some sort of alcohol, we're not 100% sure. Humans were smoking already, and they weren't just smoking random leaves that they picked out of the forest. I'm sure they knew which ones were narcotic in form. Trying to go after drugs, especially weed and weed-related things, is a losing premise. It's simply not going to work. Effectively, all you're doing is you're creating a bigger prison pipeline, getting some slave labor, and the government gets to be more authoritarian. THC is not generally the sort of substance that forms a significant problem. Are there some people that get absolutely blasted on weed all the time and just sit on the couch eating nachos? Yeah. Then there are people that smoke a little bit of weed once in a while in times of recreation, so they've done their work week is over, and they're like, hey, I'm going to get high and watch a movie. It's the same as beer and things like that, again, like with prohibition failing. Because it failed, we ended up with a regulated system in which the production and sale of alcohol is simply regulated. But you can go and buy alcohol, although some states have weird laws with regards to it. You go to Maryland, for example, it's only available in liquor stores. You can't even find beer in the grocery stores. Very interesting. Whereas here in Vermont, it's like nobody gives a fuck for the most part. Oddly enough, the rate of alcoholism is roughly the same. It almost doesn't matter which regulations you impose. Even that side of it, while necessary, is not necessarily the most pragmatic. But outright banning things like this does not work. If the state of Texas bans THC products from being sold, is this going to stop people from smoking their fucking toothpick? No, it's not going to stop anyone from using marijuana. And the penalties for it tend to be less harsh, which I think is a good thing because, look, there are way worse things you could be doing, like smoking crack or meth or something like that. Yeah, man, I need some ice. Sprinkle it on the pizza or something. The drug pizza. There are way worse things you could be putting in your body, like tobacco or alcohol, oddly enough. Oh, wait, those two substances are perfectly legal. I wonder why. Probably because the United States is a huge net exporter of tobacco products and a juggernaut of creating liquors. That's probably the reason why. Again, I'm just saying there's a correlation between money to be made and whether or not it is legal and or regulated. I've noticed a correlation, sort of like when the kids set up their lemonade stand and the local yokels show up and tell them to take it down because they don't have a business permit or something like that. It's because of the big lemonade monopoly, I suppose. That's probably not hyperbolic, that's the funny part. It's absolutely ridiculous. You're not going to ban THC products. What's going to happen is you're going to end up with a black market. You're also going to end up with something else that's very unfortunate. The rise of synthetics that mimic the symptoms of being intoxicated on marijuana, but are much more harmful, like K2, like spice, things like that. I overdosed on it back around, 2009, 2010, somewhere around there. It was very unpleasant, by the way. That never would have happened if weed had just been legal at the time. You think that I'm going to buy this other substance when I can just smoke a bud? That would never happen. What you're doing is you're pushing people into more potentially harmful and unregulated substance use, while at the same time penalizing people excessively for something that should not be conceived of as a crime. If a person is driving stoned, that's DUI. If a person gets stoned and punches out a cop or something, that's an aggravating factor in that particular case. But if they're sitting on their porch smoking their bowl, I fail to see the harm. And really, I mean, I look at Vermont, my own home state. Our state is generally pretty squeaky clean, safe, tourist friendly, etc. Weed is legal here. You can grow weed. You can smoke weed. Again, the other laws do apply. It has not collapsed our society. I lived in the Netherlands for several years. Weed is legal there. By the way, so is psilocybin. And soft drugs are generally, they're regulated. You're not supposed to manufacture them, but if you have a couple lines of acid, nobody really cares. Somehow, the Dutch are exceptionally wealthy, one of the most literate populations in the world, etc., etc. Somehow it hasn't collapsed their society. Their biggest problem with substance abuse is drunken British tourists, because of course the Netherlands is a stone's throw from London, and so British people go over to go and hire a hooker, they get drunk, they get plastered, and then they puke all over the place. This is apparently a proverbial thing over in the Netherlands, which caused them to want to move the red light district to south of Amsterdam, and the people there are quite wealthy. So they don't want the hookers around, and so that plan appears to have been nixed. I've discussed this at length with my wife, for example. It's ridiculous to try to ban THC products. If you want to go after people that are manufacturing crack, attempting to sell heroin to school kids, which literally never happens because they don't have any money to buy it with, that's perfectly fine. But preventing adults from simply imbibing a substance that is considerably less harmful than tobacco, and considerably less harmful and less abuse-related than alcohol, attempting to do that, number one, makes no sense, number two, is unconstitutional, number three, has already failed over and over and over again. Marijuana, being illegal, never stopped people from smoking it. In fact, it makes it cool. The kids, back in the day, they're watching like Tommy Chong and shit like that. Weed sounds fun, man. Let's go score some. You wouldn't have that. It would be associated mainly with like cancer patients and with your parents if it were just legal. And that's the truth of it. People will use these substances. The drug war has failed completely. It will continue to fail. Reigniting this, by the way, for Republicans mainly, is a terrible idea. Even your own president-elect doesn't have a problem with at least medical marijuana and has talked about rescheduling it so that people don't get felony charges for having more than an ounce of weed. Get hip with the times. People do drugs. It's just going to happen, and there's nothing you can do to legislate that out of existence. That's about all. Peace out.